you so much. All right, come on, let's move in. Tight shots, guys, tight shots. Okay, tight shots. All right.
Here, why don't you get in here?
Sorry about that.
Everybody here?
Get everyone in here.
Yeah, come on over there. Okay. Perfect, perfect.
Hello.
We're ready to start. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wade Henderson. I'm president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. The Leadership Conference is the nation's leading civil and human rights coalition with over 200 national organizations working to build an America as good as its ideals. Now, we are here today to say Attorney General nominee Jeff Sessions fails to uphold America's ideals of justice and equality for all. I want to thank Senator Richard Blumenthal for agreeing to be here today to accept over 1 million petitions calling for the Senate to reject the Sessions nomination. The petitions were collected with the help of groups including the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, People for the American Way, Daily Kos, Move On, Ultraviolet, Color of Change, Common Cause, the Center for American Progress, Friends of the Earth, NARAL Pro-Choice America, Rock the Vote, Faith in Public Life, Voto Latino, Free Press, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, and the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. I want to thank you all for your work, and several of those organizational representatives are here with us this afternoon. Now, Jeff Sessions has a 30-year record of racial insensitivity, disregard for the rule of law, and hostility toward the protection of civil rights. The Justice Department has the responsibility to protect the rights and liberties of all Americans and to serve as an essential independent check on the excesses of an administration. And for decades, Jeff Sessions has demonstrated that he is not up to the job. Senator Sessions has built his Senate career as an opponent of immigrants, the LGBT community, women, people with disabilities, and people of color. He has demonized refugees for decades. He has invented fraud claims to intimidate voting rights advocates. Now, the Attorney General is the people's lawyer, not the president's lawyer. And as we've seen, President Trump's first weeks in office have been a war on the rule of law and on our Constitution. It remains unclear if Jeff Sessions' loyalty to our Constitution or to whatever executive action President Trump wants to impulsively sign off on. Now, our Constitution guarantees religious liberty, due process, and equal treatment under the law, values that are conspicuously and unanimously and ominously absent from Sessions' track record. Now, voting in on the next top law enforcement officer in our nation with a history like Sessions is flagrantly irresponsible and unconscionable. So we stand here today with the signatures of 1 million Americans who are asking the Senate to stop Jeff Sessions. And now it is my pleasure to introduce and hand over these petitions to senior senator from Connecticut and a vital member of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Richard Blumenthal. And as I reach into my Stop Sessions envelope and pull out a thumb drive with over 1 million signatures, let it be said that we are environmentally conscious as we hand this material over to Senator Blumenthal. Senator, thank you so much. Here you are.
Thank you. Well, I'm very pleased to accept these petitions. I must say that I prefer the day when there were mounds of paper as a photo opportunity, but certainly this method is more environmentally sound and more readily accessible. And let no one doubt that whatever the form of these petitions, they will have tremendous weight on this process because we're hearing from real people who will be affected in their lives and livelihoods. Make no mistake, the Attorney General of the United States has sweeping powers and responsibilities. He decides whom to charge and perhaps not to charge, and which laws to enforce most vigorously and perhaps which not. And that comes to my central complaint and my reason for opposing Senator Sessions. At a time when our rights and liberties are threatened, and they have never been more threatened than right now, we need a champion of those core rights and principles that are not only the basis for our rule of law and our constitutional freedoms, but also our American values. And so the folks whose names are reflected here are people who may well find that their rights are unenforced because Jeff Sessions is Attorney General. I know how powerful that position is because I was a federal prosecutor. I was the United States Attorney for Connecticut, and then I was Attorney General of our state for 4.5 years. And I reported to the then United States Attorney General and then later litigated alongside of her and sometimes against her. And so I have a special respect for the position. It is an office of unique public trust. And we need someone in that role who will zealously and vigorously protect people who are vulnerable, even more than the powerful, because they need that voice and that vigorous advocacy. And I have to agree with Wade that the president has demonstrated a profound disrespect for our constitutional system by his personal insults and invective against a judge whom he has called a so-called judge and blamed the courts in anticipation of some harm that may result from a ruling that very simply upholds the Constitution against an unconstitutional ban based on religion, a ban on immigration that puts one religion above another, and a ban that I believe should be struck down by the courts. When I asked Jeff Sessions about the emoluments clause and whether he would appoint a special counsel in the event the President of the United States violated that clause, he equivocated. When I asked him about enforcing conflicts of interest laws, like the STOP Act against the President's family, if they violate that law, he equivocated. We cannot have an Attorney General who equivocates in his testimony before the Judiciary Committee on those critical questions. And you're absolutely right, Wade, that he has opposed the Violence Against Women Act. He has opposed the other laws that protect people who are most vulnerable. Immigration reform. He has called the court decision striking down a key part of the Voting Rights Act good news. And on a variety of other issues has demonstrated, in my view, lack of commitment to being a champion. That's what we need right now, is a champion of civil rights and liberties. So I will be speaking in just a little less than an hour on the floor of the Senate, as I've already done. I was the first senator to speak on the floor against Senator Sessions. I was the first to announce my opposition to him, and the first on the Judiciary Committee to do so. So I am still hoping that we will prevail when this vote is taken tomorrow. But let no one doubt that we will be watching all who vote, whatever their vote is, because this vote is about the future of our Constitution, our rights and liberties in this great country, the greatest in the history of the world, because we respect civil rights and liberties, because we respect the rights of people of all colors, all sexual orientation, all religions, genders, national origins, background. We are all equal under the law, and that should be the test and the challenge when the next Attorney General takes office. So I'm proud to be with you today, proud to accept these petitions, and now to introduce Anika Navaroli of Color of Change. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for standing up for all of us and the over 100 members that we have at Color of Change. Your work is much appreciated. As the Senator mentioned, my name is Anika Navaroli, and I am a senior campaign manager at Color of Change. History speaks for itself. Jeff Sessions is a racist. And further than that, he has been both unapologetic and brazen in his white supremacy. Like the president that he serves, he has gone so far as to insult the civil rights leaders and groups that have fought for the freedom of black folks. In Alabama, where he's from, he falsely prosecuted black political activists and called the NAACP, the ACLU, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference un-American and communist-inspired. These comments and the sentiments behind them are in themselves alarming, but what is even more alarming is the immense power that senators are willing to place in the hand of Jeff Sessions. As Attorney General, he would be responsible for leading the Department of Justice. And this is the same department that has opened investigations into police departments in cities like Chicago and in cities like Ferguson, and even in Sessions' home state of Alabama. And these investigations have exposed the ugly truth about law enforcement. And they've led to systemic change, and we at Color of Change also believe that they could radically shift how we hold police accountable in this country. But with Sessions at the helm of this department, these could all come to a halt. Voting yes for Sessions will also place him in the reins of the same agency that is tasked with investigating hate crimes. In 1 week following Trump's election, there were 437 instances of hate crimes. And these were targeting black folks, people of color, Muslims, immigrants, gay folks, queer folks, and women. 437. And that's just in 1 week. Since the inauguration, we've seen this wave of Islamophobia and xenophobia that has been released under the counsel of Jeff Sessions. We cannot trust a known racist who casually jokes about the KKK and then architects massive religious and racial bans to protect us and to protect our families from hate crimes and from violence. And as the Senator mentioned, the Attorney General has a bunch of different jobs, but there's one more crucial job that I want to talk about. In this position as Attorney General, there's a responsibility for guiding the sentencing laws in the United States. So through what are called charging memos, the Attorney General can lead federal prosecutors to seek either strict or lenient sentences. And we already know which way Jeff Sessions favors. His record shows that he has blocked drug sentencing reform despite wide bipartisan support. And in regards to the privatizations of prisons that have absolutely rocked our country, Sessions said last June, and I quote, I do think we can do a lot of privatizations in private prisons. It seems to work a lot better. In this era of mass incarceration, with 3.2 million people in correction facilities around the US, we cannot allow Jeff Sessions to continue to subjugate humans to a second-class status in this new Jim Crow. So I'll end by saying, we will not forget anyone who greenlights Trump's harmful appointments and his policies. We will not forget anyone who ignores the millions of ordinary Americans who have taken to the streets to fight and to resist the most corrupt administration that we've ever seen in our history. Any senator who supports Jeff Sessions' nominations is enabling racism and discrimination. Make no mistake, a vote for Sessions is a vote for racism It's a vote for bigotry, and it's a vote for the weakening of American values. Thank you, and coming up next is Allegra Chapman of Common Cause.
On behalf of the 100 Common Cause members who signed the petition saying no to stop Sessions, I want to thank you, Wade Henderson, for your leadership. Senator, thank you for standing up for everyday Americans. Anika, thank you for your work, and all those others here standing side by side. We appreciate the concerted effort. Republicans and Democrats alike should all agree that our constitutional rights, particularly our right to vote, the backbone to our democracy, should be enforced and protected for all Americans. That's what makes a democracy vital. It's what makes it work when we all participate, when we're all in this together. And yet, as we've seen over the past few years, that's not what's happening. For the past few years, we've seen Republicans throughout a number of state legislatures try to push through suppressive measures to keep Americans from the vote. Now, we know, based on 30 years of Jeff Sessions' record, that he will do nothing to put a stop to this, that he will not uphold the right to vote. How do we know this? As others have already mentioned, Jeff Sessions, for decades now, has called the Voting Rights Act, which is one of the most important pieces of civil rights legislation this country has ever seen, to be an intrusive piece of legislation. As the senator also mentioned, when he was a prosecutor in the 80s, he brought a case against 3 voting rights activists for doing nothing more than getting out there and registering people to vote, essentially to get out there and ensure that Americans' voices could be heard in our process. How do we know this was a witch hunt? He had no evidence, and after 4 hours of deliberation, these 3 were fully acquitted. And after the Shelby decision came down a few years ago, he applauded it as the right decision, saying, in no place, not in Alabama, not in Georgia, not in North Carolina, is the right to vote taken away from you or suppressed because of the color of your skin. Go and ask those voters in Alabama, in Georgia, in North Carolina, if that's true. As we've seen over the past few years, courts, not just the quote-unquote liberals, but some of the most conservative courts in the land, have said that these laws, particularly these photo ID laws, are suppressive measures, that they are discriminatory, and that as the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals found in North Carolina, that legislators have been aiming to suppress the vote with almost surgical precision. Sessions, as the chief law enforcement official, would do nothing to stop this. In essence, he would do nothing to protect the constitutional rights of Americans. But that's what the job requires. The job requires an attorney general to ensure that the rights of all Americans are protected equally. He doesn't get to pick and choose whom he represents. He is the people's attorney, not, despite what we've seen over the past couple of weeks, the president's attorney. Now, our senators must be reminded, and we're so pleased that Senator Blumenthal already is, that the American people are watching, the world is watching, and they are judging us. And depending on our senators' actions, we will see what the people have to say next. We've already seen people gathering in the streets, calling their senators, engaged in a way that they probably have not been engaged since the 60s. As Dr. King said in this city almost 50 years ago, the time is always right to do right. And we call on senators today to do what is right. Vote no on Sessions. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Shauna Thomas from Ultraviolet.
Senator Sessions is a threat to women. He's a threat to people of color, and simply put, he is a threat to the rule of law. Time and again, he has proven that he will not protect the rights of people of color or of women, and that in and of itself should be disqualifying. Make no mistake, Sessions' record on women is absolutely abysmal. From voting against cracking down on military sexual assault to opposing reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act throughout his career, Sessions has made it clear that he will not only be a poor advocate for women, he will be a direct antagonist, seeking to destroy the basic protections that keep women safe and help them seek justice for the crimes committed against them. This is important. The nation's chief law enforcement officer sets the tone at the Justice Department. Sessions, as Attorney General, would weaken programs that already struggle to end the epidemic of sexual assault, and did so even under a supportive administration. We know what the Trump administration thinks about women and about sexual assault. And while the Attorney General should be independent from the President in matters of law enforcement, Sessions has already proven that he's little more than a Trump lapdog. During the 2016 election campaign, Sessions, serving as a top Trump surrogate, refused to acknowledge that President-elect Trump's comments in the 2005 hot mic video, where he described forcibly kissing women and grabbing them by their genitals, constituted sexual assault. He told a reporter shortly after the news broke, quote, I don't characterize that as sexual assault. I think that's a stretch, end quote. When the Attorney General refuses to even acknowledge the crime of sexual assault, that sends a very chilling message to survivors that the crimes committed against them will not be taken seriously. That hurts women, it hurts law enforcement, it hurts all of our communities. With 1 in 5 women in America being sexually assaulted in their lifetimes, this is an epidemic we simply cannot afford to ignore. 2 weeks ago, women, including many of the over 1 million ultraviolet members across this country in every single state and congressional district, excuse me, marched in the single largest action ever to send a message to Trump, as well as Republicans and Democrats alike, that they will not tolerate Trump's racist, sexist agenda. 30 years ago, the Senate said Senator Jeff Sessions was unfit to be a federal judge. Now, Senate Democrats, and frankly Republicans as well, need to demonstrate to the American people that they heard the millions of women who took to the streets that day after Inauguration Day, and prove that their standards for our nation's law enforcement aren't lower than they were 30 years ago. With an ongoing epidemic of sexual assault and violence towards women, our nation deserves better from its Attorney General. And senators should make it clear that they find Senator Sessions unacceptable by voting unanimously against his appointment. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marge Baker. I'm the Executive Vice President of People for the American Way. We are a civil and constitutional rights advocacy organization with hundreds of thousands of members around the country. And I just want to say on behalf of our members, thank you so much, Senator Blumenthal, for the leadership role you are playing on this. Nothing could be more essential to the health and well-being of our Constitution, our country, and frankly, the world. The Attorney General has direct responsibility for using the power and resources of the federal government to establish justice, one of the primary goals expressed by the authors of the U.S. Constitution. Jeff Sessions cannot be trusted with that responsibility. 30 years ago, a bipartisan group of senators rejected Jeff Sessions' nomination to be a federal judge. That rejection was based on a troubling record, one that included the unjustifiable persecution, as we have heard today, of civil rights workers who were targeted for registering African American voters. When Jeff Sessions appeared before the Judiciary Committee last month, the burden was on him to demonstrate that the judgment made by the senators 30 years ago was wrong. He failed miserably. Since the last time he came before the Senate for confirmation, he has cheered the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. He has worked closely with anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim hate groups. He refused to acknowledge that anti-black racism is still a prevalent and systemic problem. Jeff Sessions was one of Donald Trump's biggest political boosters and has close ties to Trump's key advisors. His ideas are reflected in the president's executive orders. He has promoted bogus claims about voter fraud, the same ones that the Trump administration is now planning to investigate in order to manufacture evidence that would support even more restrictions on voting. It is impossible for Americans to have any confidence that Jeff Sessions will be independent of this White House. We simply cannot trust him to stand up to Donald Trump when he violates the law and betrays constitutional values. We and a million of our fellow Americans have a very clear message to the U.S. Senate. Jeff Sessions is not fit to lead the Department of Justice. Thank you.
Questions?
If there's any questions, I think we might have a few minutes before we have to leave the room.
If not,
If not,
thank you all
thank you.
very, very much. I'd also like to thank everyone up here. I know you represent other groups, and I hope we prevail and uphold your dedication. And thanks so much to all of you for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Senator.
Senator.
Terrific.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
Thank you.
Great
Really
job.
appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for coming. We appreciate it. Okay, very good.
Okay.
Senator, your staff is fantastic. Thank you, too. They were terrific. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.